order the Parish-wide Drainage Liaison Committee for Thursday, June 29th. Roll call, please, Ms. Kathy.
Yes, sir. Mr. Andrepont?
Here.
Mr. Barris?
Here.
Mr. Gentry? Mr. Landry?
Here.
Mr. McMillan?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
And Chairman Scott?
Here.
You do have a report.
Thank you, and before that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you could please silence any electronic devices, and if you'd like to speak on any issue tonight on the agenda, please fill out a blue slip and bring it up to Miss Jessica. We want to make sure you have ample time of speaking tonight. With that, we're going to go to item number 3, receive public input on proposed revisions to Chapter 26 of the Code of Ordinances of Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana, pertaining to drainage standards. Mr. Beam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to recap, your committee met on June 13th, where the proposed ordinance revisions were presented to you, and since that time has been a public input period. We do not have any type of presentation tonight. It's simply to give it back to you to chair for any public input. Certainly, Alan and others are available for any questions during the session if needed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Beam. With that, I'm going to lay down just a few ground rules for tonight. We're looking for all of the public input that we can get. So tonight, we're going to set out about a 5-minute time limit per person. You're going to be warned at 3 minutes and then again at 5 minutes. Are we going to shut you down? Not if you're saying new stuff that we need to hear about that really pertains to the ordinances of Chapter 26. Please try not to be repetitious. We know everybody would like to dig the ditches wider and deeper and all those things that we've heard, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time tonight. So if you have something new to discuss, new ideas, new thoughts, we want to make sure everybody has that time. So with that being said, we are going to go straight to public comment period, and I'm going to start off with Mr. Tim Flavin. You good? You need? I'll put you at the end. I'll go to Mr. Matt Red. All right. Do I got a blue slip? All right, Ms. Wise, would you like to come up and take the podium? I should have gave her some warning. Name and address, please.
Jeannie Wise, 3891 Jasmine Boulevard, Lake Charles, 70605. Good afternoon, Mr. President and jurors. On behalf of the Alliance for Positive Growth, we have, as you know, submitted our comments, and I have those for you, hard copy for all of you jurors. What you have in your hand is 6 pages, 33 comments. We took time to dig into these ordinances, take a look, had engineers, our board, our members look at that, and we submitted them. We personally just wanted you to have a hard copy for the fact that we want you to know the ins and outs of our thoughts. If there's something that you feel that we did not cover, please correspond back with us. If you have any questions, please let me know. We want to know the ins and outs of your thoughts as well. So if there's an ordinance that's hanging around that you might foresee, you know, future development, and we have another opinion, let's talk about it and share our opinions together. It's crucial. We have business leaders that are in our committee, on our boards. This is their livelihood. This is how we're making a difference in the community, and we want to work together with you guys in a positive manner. So if we can continue to gauge together on this, we would certainly appreciate it. And we also have, any issues that perhaps down the road, if we see that we may need to defer the timeline and amending all of these proposals, we definitely feel that there's plenty of room and time to take those steps ahead.
Do you, for the sake of the public, out of these comments, do you have 2 or 3 of these you'd like to just tell us about that kind of stand above the rest? I know they're all important, but is there maybe 2 or 3
My
of these?
experts are back here.
So you want, well, maybe if they want to fill out a blue slip and speak towards maybe in a little while, but
Yeah.
if they have some of these
Yeah.
that we'd really like to hear about and they want the public to hear about, we'd love to have it on record
Yeah.
right now. And
Well, definitely the additional 22 cent per square foot, yeah. So, that could be a hardship for some, and that could be, time and money. And it's, our businesses are on the line right here.
all right, Mr. Angelpont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you've heard this before, and I know you're representing a group. Now is the time to step up to the plate and make your presentation. There's been a lot of time and effort in the past that got us to where we are today. And I was visiting with 2 or 3 people before the meeting convened, and unless we hear from you and know exactly where you are and where you want us to be, once this thing is adopted, it's going to be in place. So you need to speak up now or forever hold your peace. I mean, I'm telling you, this is very important, and that's why the chairman has dedicated this time to you today to let us know what your feelings are, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and so we can move forward. And, I'm at your disposal, and so is the rest of the committee. We want to do what you want to do and work together. Some changes need to be made in the ordinance. Now is the time for you to tell us. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Do you want me to have one of our members?
Maybe if they want to fill out the blue
elaborate?
slip, and as we continue to go through, we want to make sure that people have,
Sure.
if they have a thought about one specific,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to Mr. Emmett Soul. Name and address, please, sir.
All right, it is Emmett Soul, and I live at 4433 West Prian Lake Road in Lake Charles, which is outside the city limits, but adjacent to the city of Lake Charles. To further introduce myself, I was on the Lake Charles Planning and Zoning Commission for about 5 or 6 or 7 years. I can't remember now. As such, I tried to do, for the most part, what I thought was in the best interest of the city, no matter what the opposition or how many. And I was actually involved in a very controversial application that the Lake Charles Planning and Zoning Commission approved, but the city council reversed it, and there was litigation over it, and it was very controversial. But in that instance, I was for the application for the development of the property that was at issue. And appearing here tonight, I have no interest at all in trying to stifle development. I think that our city and our parish in southwest Louisiana should be encouraging further development of properties and doing what we can to increase commerce and business in our community. That said, however, with my past experience in not only being on the Planning and Zoning Commission, but also representing applicants before the planning commissions of both the parish and the city, and representing opponents on occasion, I have an interest in what we're looking at, and my interest tonight is focused on drainage. And this is somewhat personal because it relates to, and my experience in the application that brings me here tonight is right down the street. And it is a development at 4421, I think, West Prian Lake Road of the Prian Lake Place subdivision. I took it upon myself, along with my neighbor who will speak tonight, to speak to the applicant, and we've had a good working relationship in between Mr. Crane and Mr. Wainwright. We have in place now, we can meet and talk about the issues that are important to us and the development of this property. The most overriding one has to do with drainage. South Lake Charles, where we live, out by the Lake Charles Country Club, has a drainage problem like the rest of us do. My appreciation of the elevation of Calcasieu Parish is that the highest spot is 21 feet above sea level. So we're all living in a rice field. So development of properties around us is very important. This particular tract is bounded on 3 different sides by private property. On one side by the Lake Charles Country Club, on another side by individuals whose homes are adjacent, and then on the west side by West Prairie Lake Road. That initially, like everybody else, and I've seen it happen as many times as anybody in this room probably, except Wes, people are most interested and most concerned about the density of a subdivision. In this particular instance, the applicant and the application met the zoning ordinance for density requirements, and ultimately it was approved at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting right before Memorial Day, I think it was. I was out of town, and I had met along with one of your other speakers tonight with Wes and Alan, and they were very, very helpful, and we discussed drainage, et cetera, et cetera. Since that time, as I said, the applicant has agreed to bring to us and let us be part of his consideration and the consideration of his engineering firm about drainage. But what I've come to realize, not only from my past experience, but from what I've been through here, is that a lot of what concerns people when you take the question of drainage can be solved and resolved, I think, if there was more information on the front end. I understand, and Wes has reminded me of the process, and the process is such that you don't want to make an applicant come to the Planning and Zoning Commission with $500 million worth of engineering work done for them and then have it turned down. What you want is for them to come with some concept and present it to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Planning and Zoning Commission says we can subdivide this property. In this instance, what we had was a conceptual site layout plan that laid out these 5+ acres and said, hey, here's how we're going to subdivide this 5 acres into 16 lots. There was some, I wasn't there, but there was some discussion amongst others about drainage and some other questions other than density, and it was approved. But we had all of this, thousands of emails, back and forth by telephone and doing whatever, when in fact, if the applicant had been required to do a conceptual drainage layout for us, just telling a little bit more about what the plan was than simply getting the property subdivided and then later on come to a preliminary plan that has some preliminary drainage information and then come along and get the final approval, a lot of what's been going on and all this would not have happened as far as I'm concerned. I looked at the April 2017 drainage design that makes sense plan that was presented to us, or was part of out in the public domain. And it talks about the drainage initiative. And when it gets down to subdivisions, it said 2 things that are of interest to me. Number 1, it said conceptual plans shall be submitted with drainage concepts included. So not at the preliminary planning stage, but at the conceptual plan, when, as in this case, the applicant presented a plot plan that showed the subdividing of these 5+ acres, there would have had to have been, if this was approved with that kind of a conceptual drainage plan as part of the conceptual plan that's submitted with the application to subdivide, we would have known a little bit more, and the applicant would have known a little bit more also. And I'm not suggesting that I think that the applicant has to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, but in this case, the applicant should know, and we should have been informed a little bit more, I think, that on 3 sides of this property, you have private properties. and the applicant has no right of eminent domain. So the only way they're going to drain this property is in the public right-of-way, which is West Prairie Lake Road.
You're at about 8 minutes, so we still have other speakers, but
Okay.
please continue. and-
I shall be brief. I'm just about to the end.
No problem.
I appreciate you allowing me to extend my time.
Yes, sir.
So what I'm asking for is, but it doesn't seem to be in what I saw as the present thing. Alan, I think, was talking to one of the other speakers, and it may be just a mix of words, but again, what I'm looking for is something on the very front end that's conceptual, just like the concept that we're going to divide this into 16 lots. The second thing is that it says in this document that I pulled up and have, it says a required runoff management plan shall be submitted with a preliminary plat for approval. Well, that is something I understand that's a lot more specific and a lot more technical than simply a concept of, look, we're going to try, we know we've got a problem, we need to drain this property because we're going to be adding all this concrete to it, and here's what we see right now, so that you don't get these firefights at the Planning and Zoning Commission level. Thank you very much, and I want to compliment both Wes and Alan for being very cooperative with us, too. They've gone above and beyond the call of duty, just as Mr. Connor, who's sitting over there, was with me, and something I had to do with him a while back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Soul. Mr. Landry.
Who's keeping track of the time?
I'm gonna do it. Sam is.
Well, I mean, if,
I'm gonna be lenient because I know how many speakers we
you're
have.
gonna have
so
to
as
be,
long-
if you let that man speak for 10 minutes, you're gonna let her, I mean, you know, however.
We got
many-
time. I got till 5:15,
all
so. And what I'm gonna do next is bring up Mr. Bradford, because after reading your email, I think you're gonna tag on to a lot of what Mr. Soul said. So maybe I'll let you just follow up with that. How would that sound?
I'll be fine.
All right?
I'm John Bradford. I've spoke about a month ago here. Sure. I represent myself, nobody else, in this. I'm Emmett's neighbor, and I've looked at because of our current drainage, I looked at your proposed drainage issues. I think you have a concept that you want, a conceptual plan, that you want a conceptual drainage plan to come in at that time. I think you have eliminated it, not put it in there. I think when you struck out the words on, your conceptual plan is on number 27. What you talk about is servitudes of pipeline, basically utilities and drainage. So you're talking about servitudes. And your previous one, you made them put a plan in, and now you've strucken that out. You've eliminated. So I think what you've said in what you want to do, you have eliminated it, not put it in. Also, I've come to the experience that even though you say, I want a conceptual plan, I want this plat plan with drainage, you have waivers, and the staff gives waivers, and there's no hearing about it. So the public, right now in my own deal, we still don't know what a conceptual plan is, and they've already got it approved, preliminary approval. Now, they're supposed to do something else later. And so if you looked at my email, I went through this, and y'all want public hearings. I listened to the January 13th meeting. You want public input. How can you expect anybody to give you any input if they don't know the information? They just can't. They'll come up here and rant. They'll come up here and talk about things. I went through each of those applications. I'm hoping, and I sent it to everybody, so I don't want to go through it here, but I noted where you say public hearing. Well, give them some information. Maybe they'll not go, but at least you're giving the public a chance. I really believe, and I deal with litigation and disputes, but we're solving most of the cases. You hardly go to trial anymore because we mediate these issues. And we sit down with the opposing parties and we try to work it out. And there's nobody better to act as a mediator than the public. They have an interest to everybody. They have an interest to the developer. They have an interest to the people. So it wouldn't hurt to have very upfront a meeting where we all got together and we said, well, this is where I want to drain. Well, what about this problem? Oh, I hadn't thought about this deal. And my deal, I pointed out to the developer, there's a 48-inch storm drain only 200 yards from where your property is. See about draining out there. You know, he didn't realize that. But the people who live there and who see all these things, they know. Give the people an opportunity to get information so you can have a good public hearing. Okay, I'm going to just point out that one of the most important things is on page 126, where you're going to tell people pre- and post-development. That's great. I mean, and pre- and post-development discharge rates. That's what we really need to know. What were the discharge rates before the development? What is going to be the discharge rates after the development? Don't leave that out. Don't waive that. But if you start waiving things, on that page, they have a conclusion. Well, conclusions will be waived. So when you agree to waive, you have a whole page when you can waive something. We have a problem with drainage in this parish. Everybody, and if you start waiving the things that they want to require, we're in problems. There's other things. I put them in my email to you. I hope you look at them. I think the plans are good. I think the concept is good, what you want to do. I just think that some of the details, you know, it's like a settlement document. Sometimes you put this in a preliminary document and then you develop and put it in a final, and it doesn't get through. I told Alan that I would be willing to sit down, like Mr. Landry said, go through line item by item and tell them what I liked or disliked, and I would hope that the developers could sit down at the same meeting, and so we could go item by item, what we like, what we dislike, and then you would actually know, maybe, you would have an opportunity to know what the disputes that we can foresee might be, and maybe you can resolve, maybe we can resolve it, maybe we can't, maybe you have to make a decision. Anyway, I certainly would like to try to do something so that we do get a decision, or see if we can't compromise and work things out and allow the developments. I'm pro-development. I just don't want to hurt the other people who were there before.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Mr. Angelpont.
Mr. Bradford, I just want to tell you, I like the comments that you presented here this afternoon, and those are the benchmarks that we need to shoot from. There's a timeline set, but I think the committee has agreed the timeline doesn't mean anything until we get comments from yourself who are in the know and can come up here and give some direction to the committee where we can work with staff and move forward where everybody can be represented in this issue. And I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate your email. It is very detailed. Thank you, sir. Alan, yes, Mr. Wainwright.
Just a few comments on that, if you'd like. Number one, I think we agree on almost all points with both those guys, really. I've had several discussions with them, Wes, and we appreciate all their comments. On the conceptual plan issue, we agree as a staff that we want the conceptual plan for subdivision to be a mandatory first step. And really in the ordinance, it was already in the ordinance as a first step, but there was one line in that ordinance that gave it a bit of a loophole where it kind of said we suggest that it happen. We took the word "we suggest" out of the ordinance, so in essence, the conceptual plan now would become a mandatory step. So in the conceptual plan itself, some of their questions and comments were about what is in that plan. We feel like there's a paragraph on that page that describes what should be in a conceptual plan. And again, we are trying to keep this to be something very simple, something that can be done with very little expense to all parties involved. It's really meant to be enough of a document or a drawing to have a good conversation over a piece of property with our staff and their developers, so that we can point out problems and we can just kind of get off on a good foot with a new development. In that paragraph, it calls for, hey, tell us where some of the roads and streets are at, tell us where easements are at on this property, tell us if there's any pipelines, tell us if there's any gas wells, any drainage that's on the site. So you could consider putting more detail into that, but again, every bit of detail that you try and add in that, you make that particular step a little more expensive to produce and go through. So again, I think, number one, you generally are going to have a staff around here that, even long after we're gone, that's going to be pretty knowledgeable of the area. And they're going to be able to look, and all technology we have, they're going to be able to look at a parcel and almost immediately be able to contribute to what needs to go on there. So, you don't need a lot of information at that level. So we're kind of sort of saying, we think we have enough in the ordinance to get a decent conceptual plan, to have that meeting, to inform all parties. No need to make that too complicated. It just, that step needs to happen. I could touch on waivers if you want. That was a critical point. The reason why we have waivers is just to give you a bit of the architecture of how the ordinances are drafted up. It starts out with everybody, every form of development must do a runoff management plan. Everything you can think of. So the way the wording starts is everybody has to do it, and then you give waivers to certain developments that you know you don't want to do a study for. Because in essence, there's no need to study someone putting a carport onto the back of their house. We don't need an full-depth engineering study for very simple projects. So you give people waiver out of that net that don't need to study their project. When they understand how the waivers work after that, if you don't do a study, basically you're gonna ultimately find out that you're gonna have to do some sort of on-site detention. You're gonna have to manage your water on-site. If you don't do a study, and you're going to be asked to do a few things otherwise in the design of your site or in your site plan, some of the field things, but basically you're just going to pay an impact fee. The waivers are reserved for the minorest, I don't think that's a word, but the most minor developments. However you're supposed to say that, I'm sorry, but the minor developments, the ones that are not going to be a significant impact to the watershed, the entire watershed, the ones we want to get on through the system, that's what the waivers are designed for. And we could go into great detail on that particular group of them, but understand everybody's in, and then you try and take some developments out so that not everyone has to do an entire engineering study.
All right, Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan, don't you think there's a way that we could maybe describe what would justify a waiver?
Well, it's a very simple thing. Number one, anyone adding something onto your existing residential lots, any building permit related to an existing residential lot. Again, that's generally going to be your homeowners who are out there in the parish who are adding something on or doing something on a lot. We're just really not interested in engineering study for that. The second waiver is for any existing lot of any nature that's 2 acres or less in size. Then the third one is for any development or existing lot that has already been previously mitigated through a previous study, because there's some that are out there like that. And then there's a fourth one that is anything less than 20% impervious. So those are the ones that we give waivers to study their site. After that, that's all in what's called Chapter 26, Section 215. After that, a development moves to Chapter 26, Section 216, where the design standards are at. There's going to be some requirements in there to help protect even that development that just got a waiver from creating an additional burden on the upstreams and downstream. But again, you're trying to, the way the words, so we're trying to get people a little faster to their final permit without such an exorbitant study done on a minor development. And that's the goal, and it has been a challenge to weave a line in terms of who gets a waiver and who doesn't. We feel like we had a good starting spot, and we don't feel like we've overdone it. Generally, the developments that are going to have the most impact on the overall watershed are the bigger ones. and that's what the real goal is about. We've kind of said this before. Overall, your ordinances have done a decent job of focusing on subdivision developments, but they've missed a lot of the other sort of large developments, if it's the Walmart or just anything over sort of non-subdivision, but a significant development, really hadn't been asked to do a study like this. So that's really the broad spectrum of developers' projects that you're trying to study thoroughly before they get built, so there can be no net impact on the upstream or downstream or neighboring properties.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Mr. Beam?
Just if you would allow me before the next speaker, I'd like to ask Ms. Wise to come back up. I have a question with what they submitted simply on the date, if she's still here.
Ms.
I
Wise?
think it can be easily cleared up.
Mr. Beam would like to ask you a question, if you don't mind coming back to the podium. And then after that, Mr. Tommy Cryer, you will be our next speaker.
Hey, Judy, thanks for coming. I need to clarify, the document y'all submitted from Alliance for Positive Growth is dated, you have it dated Wednesday, May 31st. The reason I want to ask is because the ordinances that we're asking comments on were actually released on June 13th. Now, what I'm guessing, and I don't want to guess though, we had stakeholder meetings and y'all had representatives there. I think it was April 24th that week. And it might be comments related to that, but if it's prior to what the June 13th document is, I want to make sure that these are comments on the actual latest proposal. So can you maybe explain that? Because it's dated 2 weeks before the actual ordinance proposal was sent out. So I'm worried maybe these comments are on an earlier version, but we can deal with that later. But
Yeah, let me double check. I
just want to make sure, because some of the things that y'all brought up, well, we have, and Alan did make changes based on stakeholder input, and maybe some of those were made that this wouldn't be the latest, but maybe you just
Yeah.
have a wrong date.
let me double check, Brian.
Okay.
Thank you
That's good.
for bringing that up.
All right, Mr. Tommy Cryer. And Mr. Guy will let you know when you're at 5, but we're going to around 8 minutes. We have 3 other speakers after you, and we have plenty of
It
time.
won't be 5 minutes. I do have some copies of what I have that I'd like to give you all. That's okay. Huh?
Name and address, please.
Oh,
Tommy Cryer at 3883 Deer Run Road. Oakville. I think that's before.
Raise the microphone, please.
Okay. Okay. I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I watched it online, and I saw some of the jury's comments, and I appreciate the skepticism, because I'm skeptical too of these ordinances. And so I'd just kind of like to read, what I put here. First of all, I'd like to ask that the parish staff put each ordinance change in layman's terms in a summary of how it will affect the cost of property owners and future property owners. And I think it would be fair if a third party would look at these points and summaries to confirm that they're being accurately interpreted. Then I would ask for these changes to be published online and in the local media. And here's some examples of questions and statements that I have from attending one of the meetings, and some of these things may be old ideas, may have been taken care of, I don't know. But number one, retention pond size requirements will expand. How much? Number two, exactly how much will a citizen pay for a drainage impact fee when he pulls a building permit? Number three, explain low-impact development and specific punitive cost for not leaving green space, trees, and undisturbed wetlands. how much is the punishment in real dollars? Leaving land undisturbed may sound good to some people, it's just not practical or even possible in most developments. Number 4, every new residential building has to be built 1 foot higher than the adjacent street, even those not in a flood zone. Why? Number 5, some residents will be limited to 12 to 18 inches of fill for their house pads. People who live in these areas may not want to sign on to this, and they should have a say. Number 6, the parish would prohibit any development at least 200 feet from a drainage lateral. Shouldn't we, as a parish, purchase this property from the rightful owner? Number 7, it was made clear that digging deeper ditches and putting in bigger pipes was not a major priority for the parish. Maybe we should focus on getting rid of water instead of storing it. Number 8, the parish made it clear that the door is wide open to reach even further in the future, and that kind of worries me. So I think we should get together and give the public very specific, plain language details about these ordinances. They may not agree that it's going to accomplish what it has set out to do, and they may not agree with the price tag either. I constantly hear from people complaining about high prices on land and homes. They don't know where these costs are coming from, but I think everyone in this room does. They are indirectly complaining over the overburdensome restrictions that continue to drive prices up, such as the points that I brought up this evening. And finally, do we really think that these ordinances are going to solve our problems, or are we just trying to make constituents feel like we're doing something? And I'm afraid that's what we're doing. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Mr. Cryer. Mr. Barris.
Thank you. Mr. Wainwright, you and I had a conversation a couple days ago, and something that you said, you know, it stuck with me. It was something pertaining to the FEMA flood rating and trying to stay ahead of that in order to keep our flood rating to a certain point so that our flood insurance would not keep going up. Would you maybe revisit that for me?
Glad to. Well, just to be as brief as possible, we as a community, we participate in the flood FEMA CRS program. That actually run through Wes's department. Dana Watkins is our manager, that is our floodplain manager. And in essence, and oversimplified, is that program is a points-based program that, not unlike fire ratings, are similar, where the more points you earn as a community through good policies, practices, all of the above, as it relates to flooding, the more points you earn, the lower ultimately affects your insurance rates. You can hold insurance rates, or you can sort of fight against higher rates. As conditions around at the federal level, where the insurance rates are ultimately, the whole program starts, and those conditions change, that program is heavily subsidized at the federal level, which is one of the ways they keep insurance rates down now. As conditions change over time, I think we agree that the stronger we are in terms of that program and the points that we can earn and garner, the stronger we will be in a better position we will be in to manage our rates as we go down the road. So we just have a goal of maximizing our points in everything that we do, so that we can hold those rates down, which is a direct benefit to the citizen.
Thank you, Mr. Wainwright.
You bet.
Miss Robin Basone. Basoni. Name and address, please.
Rhonda Massini, 1010 Lakeland Drive, Lake Charles. I represent myself, small business owner. My main concentration is wastewater treatment. So first I'm going to say I was here on June 13th, and I clearly received the message that every one of you were interested in public input. So whether we're nervous to come up here and speak with you, I definitely appreciate that you want to hear from us. Page 134, the top of the page, number 2, sewer effluent from individual or community sewer systems shall not be discharged directly into open ditch systems or in the roadside ditch. I'm wondering what the alternatives will be to that discharge. Because currently, Department of Health issues those permits, and the standard is to a proper drainage course, and in 90% of the cases, roadside ditches. Page 138, number 4, sewer effluent discharge shall not be routed through any detention basin. I'm curious to see how that will be regulated. Currently, a property owner obtains their permit from the Department of Health and then brings that to obtain their building permit. So that's going to change the permitting process, or is there coordination with Department of Health that will change it on that front end? And I wanted to give an example of a development that if it's a commercial project, building for industrial use, and a lot of heavy trucks coming in and out to bring equipment in and out, and a lot of concrete. With the detention pond standards and surrounded by concrete, the effluent reduction requirements from the Department of Health takes up land. I've seen cases where you're very limited on a discharge point, and on-site wastewater spray is not an option with all of the concrete. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Wainwright?
Couple things, good questions. Number one, the way it's read is correct. We do anticipate that's a significant change to the system. Not necessarily, or we're not suggesting how going to sprinkler systems or anything like that. What we're suggesting in the way this is worded is that what's happening now is we're building subdivisions, and we're in essence building very high maintenance miles because of the fact that we put in a nice drain ditch, a storm drain ditch, and we immediately dump 200 homes worth of sewer discharge on a daily basis into that ditch, which ultimately requires that your public works department has to go out there and constantly dig that ditch year in and year out. It also is a driving reason why the culverts stay plugged up. There's vegetation in the ditch. I guess at the end of the day, you could go on and on as to what we've all are very aware of what the ditches can look like in heavy sewer effluent discharge. Whether treated or not, it's still an issue. So in this effort, does read, the first thing you got to understand the way the entire ordinance reads, but first thing we're calling for is that new subdivisions be in closed ditch systems, but we provide an option for you to have an open ditch. If you're going to design a subdivision for an open ditch, then we suggest that it must remain open for the life of that subdivision. We go on to suggest that if you're going to have that open ditch, that you're going to have a better plan for your sewer in this new subdivision than just an individual treatment plant that dumps it in that ditch that basically adds miles to your road system that is at high maintenance levels. So more than likely what's going to happen is community systems are going to have to be installed and strategically located in these new developments so that they can discharge in a place that is not basically going to spoil the entire open ditch system with effluent discharge. I have spoken as late as yesterday with Dane Thibodeau at the Department of Health and Hospitals. He's familiar or, in the process. We understand the change. We understand that there's going to be a few challenges out there, but it's a necessary, we believe both, I think. I don't want to speak for him. I'll let him do that. He couldn't make it tonight, but I don't think we're off in terms of what we think can be accomplished. The goal there, though, is to not create high-maintenance miles where the sewer's going straight into the ditches, and basically to force an alternative solution for treatment. You have a community system program. You've already provided that to the development community. You take over, you offer to take over the ownership and operations of that and do all the future maintenance of that system. So I think this is a very positive step in terms of creating low-maintenance miles and putting that discharge in a place where it's just a little less of an issue. The reason why it isn't allowed to go through detention ponds or dry detention ponds is we have many examples already in Calcasieu Parish where the sewer drains in the ditches drain to the detention pond, and the detention pond becomes a very wet wasteland. They can't be managed or mowed or anything done to it except for once, in the toughest of drought conditions, can you actually get out there and take care of these things. So if we're going to have a detention pond, then in other communities really becomes an aesthetic feature in a new development. The last thing we want to do is route sewer discharge right through that pond. So is it going to create a challenge to the development, the design of the development? Yes, sir. To all of y'all, it will. But it's a necessary step to keep these things from being high maintenance and usable features inside of a development.
Thank you, Mr.
May I
Wainwright.
ask a
Yes,
couple
ma'am.
of short follow-ups?
Yes, ma'am.
Will the inability to discharge directly into the open ditch system, will that apply to individual homeowners that are replacing or upgrading systems?
This piece of ordinance is strictly intended to be relative to new developments. And at the point where you're designing a subdivision with hundreds of homes in it or however that's the intent. So it should not affect, it's definitely not intended to. We can double check the wording on that and make sure absolutely that's not the case. The goal is new development of new residential type, new subdivisions where we know we have, the way your ordinance is worded today, you can generate, still possible to put in mechanical systems that drain to the ditch ultimately. Now, those systems have changed over the years. They're effluent reduced and almost zero discharge to the ditch. They're a lot better than they used to be. The goal is to, we know where ditches are dry because there's no sewer in them, in essence. The homeowners take care of them themselves. They mow them. They do everything. There's really very little maintenance to them. But once you put that constant source of water in that ditch, it becomes, the Public Works needs to come take care of this mess for me. And I get it. I understand. We do that every day, all day. And we are trying to avoid building more of that.
And the last one is, and it may be a wording issue as well, on the effluent discharge shall not be routed through any detention basin or pond. I completely understand that we would not ever discharge any type of wastewater treatment discharge into a detention pond that can make that pond go septic, et cetera. What I was asking is if the discharge could be routed completely through a pond, so a fully enclosed discharge pipe that travels through a detention pond and then discharges into a drainage course, if that is the only alternative on a project.
I guess I would answer that as no, I have no intentions of routing something in a pipe through a pond. What we allowed for in the ordinance, number one, wet pond, dry pond, two scenarios. Wet pond, I would almost assume you just need to totally stay away from it. Wouldn't want any kind of pipeline going through it if that's what you're describing that may have a problem in the future. A dry pond, we did allow for, if it has to go through there in some way, that be a concrete lined channel or a piped situation, most likely either subsurface or a small trough built where it doesn't spoil the entire dry pond area so that it can be maintained. The maintenance of these ponds and things are going to be by those homeowners, and large part the changes that we have to the design of the ponds are to make sure these ponds are built as easy to maintain as possible, because that's who's going to have to take care of them, the owners of these new developments.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have to remind everyone that we do have another meeting at 5:30, so we have to adjourn here at 5:15 tonight. We have 3 more speakers, and so we still have plenty of time, but I do want to make sure everyone in the public knows we do have to adjourn at 5:15. With that, we're going to open the floor to Mr. Charlie Atherton.
Charlie Atherton, 122 Vine Street. Still trying to figure out how to convey the public's concerns. Maybe you can help me here. What is each one of y'all's definition of a subdivision? If you could give me in 1 or 2 sentences, what is your definition of a subdivision?
Streets and homes.
Do what?
Streets and homes.
Okay.
You want the mailbox in front of the house? I mean,
Well, no, but I'm dead serious because.
I am too. I mean,
Yeah, well, because your definition of a subdivision is a lot, a tract or a parcel of land when you divide it into 2 or more lots. It doesn't matter if it's 1 acre, 10 acres, 40 acres. So it appears that all of this is going to apply to a mom and dad that's doing nothing but splitting a little piece of property to give to a kid, or maybe I want to sell 1 of my 40 acres. Well, if I want to sell 1 acre of my 40, it appears I'm now in a subdivision. And a subdivision development is any parcel of land you take and you split it, you divide it in any shape, form, or fashion. That's where my heartburn is. And it also says that if I give one of my kids 1 of those acres, I'm of the opinion I'm now a developer, because it says a subdivider's a developer. So I'm trying to get, my heartburn is, this room ought to be packed. You got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of individual landowners that have no clue that they're going to drown under the weight of the regulations if and when they try to do something. So what I'm asking is that the wording and the language and the definitions match your intentions. Because everything I've heard kind of makes sense, except when I'm thinking, wait a minute. If I give one of my kids, an acre or whatever, I'm not about to provide a 300-foot floodway through my property or whatever's associated with it, because I don't understand that. So my point, not to beat it to death, is you somehow need to make all the definitions and the wording match what your intent is, because to the average person, a subdivision is like you say, a dozen homes or 400 homes. We're thinking big scale, not just the individual homeowner dividing a piece of property in 2. So that's my first point.
3 minutes, Charlie. Charlie, 3 minutes. Right here. He's right here.
Where you at?
We also believe before any of these new drainage regulations are implemented, the Calhoun Parish Police Bureau should be required to first gain the legal authority to be able to install, clean, and maintain all current and new native drainage structures across all railroads, water diversion canals, pipelines, and interstate and state highways. Some of these current drainage choke points are the root cause of floodings. And in the past, you guys have said it can't be done. You got to do it. If you're going to do anything, do that. You got beaver dams plugging up the railroad trestles, and you can't get within 50 feet, causing problems, just as one example. The interstate's got box culverts that's plugged. So, but the main project, which you guys need to be doing right now, is what I just handed out and told you the other night. You should be focused on engineering a parish-wide drainage master plan to collect and pump rainwater from each of the parish's major watersheds to the Gulf or Cameron marshes without using the SHEP channel. Sea level rise and subsidence makes Calcasieu similar to New Orleans, and rainwater eventually have to be pumped south without using the channel. And again, the Army Corps of Engineers told you, standing at this podium, Calcasieu is just too low in elevation and too flat to prevent flooding. And then specific comments to these ordinances is we believe that land where drainage is tidal control should be exempt from these regulations, especially if the land drains directly into a bayou, river, canal, or whatever that rises and falls with the tide. All it's going to do is inundate the property, and it's just going to be a total waste of money. We find the total amount of land taken from landowners for drainage right-of-ways and easements to be unreasonable and excessive. We find the fill mitigation requirements to be unreasonable and cost prohibitive. And we believe the 25-year design storm event is cost prohibitive and should remain at the 10-year storm event. We question if the current parish road design system, drainage system, can even handle a 2-year event. So if the parish can't afford it, what makes you think the rural landowners can? And again, on the drainage impact fee, we believe you guys should just lock it in permanently at the 22 cents. Otherwise, we're going to wake up one day and it's $10. So if, you know, the 22 is good, just, we would ask that you would lock it in forever at that price. And again, we appreciate you guys trying to understand where the little landowner comes into play, because somewhere I think it's getting lost in the shuffle. And again, I just appreciate what you're trying to do. Thank you. Got any questions?
Mr. White?
Mr. Charlie,
Yes, sir.
your statement that you said that we need to focus on railroad trestles and things like that with beaver dams and all that.
Right.
And then you made a comment that the landowners with having laterals that run through their property have given us the right of way to go in and clean that up. But the amount of right of ways that I have walked since I've become a police chief, I somewhat disagree with your statement about giving us, allowing us or gravity drainage the right-of-way to these properties to clean it, because the amount of beaver dams or blockages that are happening within our laterals right now, it's unbelievable. And we don't have the right-of-ways to that. And I know you hear me as a juror complain about that because I walk them. I see it. I see the damage that it's causing. I see the damage that the ditches aren't allowing to be able to drain to these laterals because of these blockages, because we don't have the right-of-ways to these. And I'll continue to harp on it till I'm no longer a police sheriff, because it is the fact that we don't have the right-of-ways to these laterals. Our ditches aren't moving. The water is staying there. We can't get them to move, just like you said. If we don't clean them out of railroad trestle, it doesn't go anywhere. Same way with different laterals on people's properties. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. White.
I
think that was a statement and not a
I'd just like to briefly.
1 minute. I want to make 1 minute. I want to make sure the other speakers have plenty of time. Go right ahead.
Okay, my response to that would be that it makes me wonder, take this the right way, it makes me wonder how many elected officials actually own rural property 2 acres or more. Because if you actually owned and ate a lot of beanie weenies to make them land notes, you would, and $1 hamburgers, and seeing some of the disasters that's happened when people did allow something to happen, they wind up with a 2-foot ditch being a 20-foot canal. So there's, I respectfully let you, I'm trying to respond that there are legitimate reasons why that happens, but you need to get those right-of-ways under those major blockages, because even if you had the right-of-ways from the landowners up to it, you're dead in the water. But I do appreciate your interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atherton. And Ms. Kathy, just to make sure you know, Mr. President Guidry has made it. He waded through the floods to get here. Mr. Ralph Lewing. I'm going to backtrack. Mr. Tim Flavin. Are you still going to want to talk, Mr. Lewing? Yes, sir. All right.
Tim Flavin, 2704 Nottaway Lane, representing the Alliance for Positive Growth. Well, I'm encouraged because after hearing Mr. Beam question about the timetable or whatever, I'm assuming that all of those questions have been addressed and the ordinance has been changed based on those questions?
I'm not that quick.
Okay, I just want,
We just want to make sure we didn't leave out something.
because what we're all trying to do here in the midst of this is try to make a living while we're making sure that we're doing the right thing.
Sure.
I've been building in Caltree Parish for 38 years. And back when I started, I think we had 4 people in the planning and zoning department at that point or whatever. I think if we look at how many we have now and relate that to our population, Calcasieu Parish should be 1.2 million. So, just as a side note. As a builder, if I end up building something without a specification, I end up in court and I have to have these 2 gentlemen defend me, which they are incredible attorneys because they have defended me and have done a great job. And what I'm afraid of is what we're doing is we're trying to pass a specification, which is, I'm all for doing what we need to do, drainage, and I've said that before, that I appreciate the staff, the jurors, and whatever. But my concern is that we have a specification and no plan. And I can tell you, in either case, when you have a plan and no specification, you end up in court, and you end up with problems. And what I want to propose is that in each one of our drainage districts, from what I can tell, each one of those drainage districts have done a drainage plan. But there has not been a plan to coordinate all those drainage districts for someone else to say, and a quote expert to say, how are we going to drain this parish? How are we going to do it? And what happens so many times in every one of our government entities, we're afraid because of the dollar signs to what that's going to take to do. Years ago, you guys had the vision, a number of y'all were on the police jury at the time, to do a covenant with this parish on paving every one of the roads in our parish.
3 minutes.
And what you had is you had a plan of, you listed every road that you were going to pave in that order. And you had a plan, and the contractor had a specification to do it. So my concern is we're trying to pass a specification and not really knowing what the effects of that. Because that one of the plan will show you is what the impact, the economic impact of this, because none of y'all know that. I don't think the staff knows that, okay? And I'm not, the staff is doing what they need to do because we have a problem. But in addressing it, I just want to make sure that, again, I think we're just moving way too fast instead of saying all the studies and everything that, you know, that typically is done, is why haven't we done a drainage plan? Are we worried that our system that we have in place is going to be criticized or whatever? And you know, that's my question to y'all. Why hasn't that been done for a parish-wide drainage, to take all of those districts and, you know, put those together? One of the comments about the sewer discharge, I know a number of years ago, which was a great deal, is that we passed an ordinance to make sure that all of those sewer systems were not discharging sewer into our ditches or whatever. And I think we've done a great job, because I hear the complaints from our clients saying that, you know, the parish is making me do this. Well, you need to do that. You want your kids out in the ditch playing in sewer, so we're a big advocate of that, of having that done. So if we have an ordinance to take care of all of our systems
minutes.
are working, then we should be okay at putting that discharge in. So what I would recommend, again, we've submitted our questions instead of going, if we take every one of those specifics, we're going to be here for longer than a 2-hour meeting. And so either get it to where you put a committee together and get the residents and the stakeholders together and go down line item by line item, or invest in a plan to have an engineering firm come in here and say, what needs to be done here? Because it could be that that plan comes back and says, we have no plan. We have no plan. And so now we're going to put a bunch of regulation and restriction that may not do anything anyway other than kill the economic viability of this area. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Flavin. We do have 20 minutes remaining, and we have 2 more speakers, so we will let you know when you're at 5 minutes and then 8 minutes, so that we have a 2-minute rebuttal if need be. If not, you can take the last 2 minutes. With that, Mr. Ralph Lewing, or Mr. Red. Okay, I have 3 speakers left then, so now you're definitely each going to get 8 minutes, because Mr. Kip Coltrane is also speaking. So 8 minutes is our time now.
Okay, thank you. Matt Red, 1424 Ryan Street, Matt Red, 1424 Ryan Street, Lake Charles. I'm with the Alliance for Positive Growth. Following up with Tim saying, I mentioned this at the last meeting. We could very well need this ordinance. We could use this ordinance, but it's a piece of the puzzle. It is not the answer. And what I'm afraid of is that it is exactly what Tim said, is that it's going to create a burden on us without knowing what the true need is. And until we do a true parish-wide, meaning the municipalities, the drainage districts, and the unincorporated areas, the stakeholders, the landowners, the engineers, we got some very smart people in this parish. We've got farmers and cattle guys in Carlos that are seeing things they've never seen before. We've got guys in Moss Bluff that have seen things they've never seen before. Same thing in Deatonville. I mean, in Lake Charles, okay? There's water on Kirkman Street that we've never seen before. In Sulphur, in Westlake. We have got to get together, and my challenge to y'all is put this committee together, and let's truly take a true hard look at what needs to be done parish-wide, including the municipalities. And until you do that, we call it Band-Aids, and I know they've done a lot of work on this, but that's what it is. And so when we go spend money on water retention ponds, and I mean, it's great that we're committed to doing those sort of projects, and it could very well work in that little area, but how do we know that's really going to be part of the master plan? And I strongly encourage y'all to let's get these groups together. We've done it in the past on other items, and we're here to help. But to sit here tonight and go over line by line, I mean, this isn't the forum to do it. And we've taken the time to come up with those comments, but it can't be fixed in an hour-and-a-half meeting, being able to speak 3 minutes at a time. But we need to get the smart people in our community that are capable of doing this to work with you guys, to work with the staff, and to work with the cities to let's truly step back and address this.
Thank you, Mr. Red. Question? All right. Mr. Ralph Lewing.
Ralph Lewing, 2001 Charvet. My business is on 1214 Country Club Road. Alliance for Positive Growth. I chair the Drainage Committee. In following up what everybody else has said tonight, we've discussed 3 different issues that basically fall under 3 different guidelines, from sewer to subdivision ordinances to drainage. And they're all correlated. I mean, that right there begins to relate the complexity of the issue we're dealing with. And when we formed this group, our main goal was to help develop positive growth in Calcasieu Parish. And I've taken on challenges before. Mr. Andrew Ponce worked with me on these challenges. He's helped me out over the years, 20 or 30 or 40 years. How long you been here?
Let's don't go there.
Okay. But anyway, that being said, we have to go back to what several people said earlier, is that one of the key issues is, no matter what we say here tonight, we could pass every one of these ordinances tonight, but tomorrow morning when y'all wake up, we still have a drainage problem in Calcasieu Parish. It's not going to be solved with these ordinances. And in the last 3 months, I've spent a lot of time, some of my own money, talking to consultants, talking to people, talking to ex-drainage board members, just trying to study in the history of this parish and our drainage problems, trying to get a handle on it, trying to say, okay, where do we start? And it's massive. But I truly believe this. I believe if we take the time to put together a good master plan for this parish, I truly think that the citizens of this parish will listen to it, they will study it, and they will support it, because we will have a solution to the problem. This parish has a good history over the years of backing up what they say. I mean, we wouldn't have what we have today if that wouldn't be the case. But I truly think for us to solve this, it's going to have to go back to developing a master plan across the parish. I mean, we got issues that are north of us. We got issues that are south of us. We got issues that are east of us that all come into this parish and create issues for us. So I guess what I'm asking tonight is just like everybody else, is that I can appreciate what you guys are trying to do. And I know you want to solve the problem, but it's not going to be solved at this meeting tonight. It's just not going to happen. And these guys here, it's a full-time job for them, and it's going to be a double-time job for them to get this done. But we got people in this parish that are, you have got the attention. You, for probably the first time in a long time on any one single issue, the police jurors have the attention of the citizens of this parish, because they want something to be done, but they want it to be done right, and they want it to be done one time, so that next year or 10 years from now, we're not battling these same issues. And real quick, make sure I have, that's it. I mean, so I'm going to stop there. If somebody else needs my minutes, they can have it. Thank y'all.
Mr. Kip Coltrane.
Roll over minutes.
My name is Kip Coltrane. I reside at 7526 Highway 1133, Sulphur, Louisiana. First and foremost, I'm not a member of the alliance they keep talking about, but I want to say that I like what they're saying. I heard a whole bunch of good ideas. And, when you get up here and get ready to speak, you got things written down, and truthfully, they just about stole a lot of the topics that I wanted to speak on. They did a good job of it. Matt made a comment talking about how people are seeing things they've never seen before. I don't think that's wholly just because of development. The weather patterns are changing. You're seeing different things happen. In short, the idea of controlling Mother Nature is a pipe dream. Not going to do it. Talking about the rice farmers and the cattlemen, do a lot of work in that sector and watch these guys take thousands of acres and trap water and release water and do all that. And, most people don't ever get an opportunity to do that. I'm also heavily involved in the drainage work. Last year I was up here in November and made a comment about a 58-foot section of ditch, how many yards of dirt it produced and the volumes and the gallons and all that. And I'd asked the question, how many miles of ditch are under the jurisdiction of the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury and its assigns? And no one knew at that time. And what the recent information has brought forth is that it's either 1,300 or 2,600 miles of ditch maintained by the parish, and they're currently 11 years and 3 months behind. That's a huge problem. That in itself gives me great pause when we say we're going to run off and start a new program. Why did we not finish the last one we started? Why did we not take care of what we were given the first time? And I'll tie that into sewer systems. And understand, a lot of y'all are my friends, a lot of people here, we've been friends over the years, and many times we're on different sides of the bench, so I don't want there to be any misunderstanding that I'm jabbing at anybody, because I'm not. Got a lot of respect for all of y'all. 7 years ago, at a meeting, I brought up the point that sewage systems don't work. Read the disclaimer on them. Household soap, shampoo, chemicals, grease, fat, kerosene, diesel, all these things tell you straight up that if those things are introduced into these systems, it renders them ineffective. When I hear about the possibility of sewer effluent and solids going into the ditch, I think that in and of itself proves that fact, because a sewer system is not supposed to let any solids out of it. So then we go back to the latest program. Let's run off and let's get in this program, pump everybody's sewer down. Hey, I get it. But the biggest thing that goes with that bothers me is that the parish has to go back and dig these ditches. Just a little confusion on my part, but didn't that what's supposed to happen? And with that supposed to happen, and we're 11 years and 3 months behind, I go back to having more great pause about this retention pond idea. Retention ponds are great in their
3 minutes.
proper places. You got a big shopping center, 5-6 acres, you fixing to tune it up, make it all parking, and you're going to have concrete or blacktop, as you often see, trap the water. Someone that's going to do a 1 acre development, and don't quote me exact, because I don't remember the exact qualifications that will require a retention pond. But what I'll share on that is something, I'll bring it back to what the parish says, through the mosquito control program. Empty the water out of any bucket you might have at your house. Flip your tires over. Don't let that water stand. It creates a heck of a mosquito problem. So now what we're going to do is we're going to build a retention pond that I am here to tell you, a retention pond at this elevation, water don't run uphill into a ditch that ain't been dug. I had a real world experience with that about 2 years ago on a project. Built a big old retention pond. Man, it's going to work. Kept telling the engineer, it ain't going to work. It ain't going to work. Why not? And when I proved it to them, they said, well, man, state ditch is too high. Wow. To date, that state ditch has not been dug out. So as a parish, you all cannot depend on the state to come dig your ditches in consideration of the fact that they have a small crew. I believe 2 track hose, 3 dump trucks, and 5 men that handle the 5 parish area was the last information I had. So that ain't happening. And then if also in conjunction with that, we're 11 years and 3 months behind on the idea of cleaning our own ditches, it's a recipe for disaster. So what you have now is a sludge pond, and let me go back, not a sludge pond, a wet area. When you carve off the topsoils, depending on the depth that's going to be needed there, the first time a person gets an opportunity to go in there and mow it, they're going to create ruts. Those ruts are going to create water trapping. It's going to be a whole plethora of problems. And the next thing, I just think, maybe I think too far, or maybe I just think from experience, but when you go in there and dig a retention pond, and all of a sudden you're trapping water, and now the vegetation is going to change, and now you're going to have cattails and willow trees and possible blackjack trees, is it too far-fetched to say that the EPA is not going to come now and say, hey, that's wetlands? And now you can't do nothing with it. Just a whole bunch of things that go through my mind with this. And, you know, one of the things that keeps being said here tonight is, slow down. Let's take a minute. And I say this with much respect, and I know they got a lot of work put in on this. I got much admiration for these guys, what they do. It just seems like we're in a hurry. It's like a new toy, and we get excited about it, and we run to it. And that, to me, is very troubling. I think many times, and I've learned a lot from many of y'all individually, different things that make me a better person some way, somehow. And I think that reciprocates, because oftentimes it's easy to sit on a board, it's easy to sit where you guys sit and think that, in fact, always the answer lies within the government, and that's not the truth. Some of these old men out here that don't have a 5th grade education will tell you more than you'll ever learn from a book. And I think we really need to step back and look at these things. Let's slow down a minute. let's look at it. I don't remember who said it, but there's a lot of people out there, a lot of good contractors that are in the know. Do dirt work, I do dirt work, whatever. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about some of these other ones, people that I look up to. We're all sitting there shaking our head going, it's bad. I'll bring to mind Beaumont, Texas. Beaumont, Texas has a very intricate retention pond system. They also have a very intricate drainage outlet. They're a little bit closer to the coast. They've dug some big ditches over there, and they keep them dry. That way they have a place to send that water when the time comes. I'll bring up a good point that I brought up 7 years ago at a meeting, the Dudley Johnson, Maine in Carlos today, and I want to call Judd out. Judd, you done a heck of a job, brother. I want to give you kudos.
Thank you.
What's happening today in Carlos ain't Judd's fault. Judd didn't make it rain. Judd's doing the best he can. But the fact remains is that the Dudley Johnson Main is a tidal ditch that ties onto Moss Lake. And if you want, I still have all the records from when we shot it last time and proved that that thing is bottlenecked. And it's probably almost halfway back full from when it was conceived and built. All the sludge from the walls, too steep, fell back in. The ditch is shallow, so it's not really an effective drain. You'll see that problem all the way up at Dudley Johnson, Maine, which right now, when I came here earlier, I've never seen the water coming over Highway 27, never. Been here 43 years. I'm good. I'm about to wrap up. You know, we look at these things and the idea that now a retention pond, if we go slam a retention pond in our yard, it's going to fix all this. It won't. Sorry. You know, some of the discussion I had about cleaning the ditches, clean them out, get them flowing. Regain that retention capacity of that ditch. The response I got was, it's not going to do nothing. I'm sorry. A 5-gallon bucket holds a lot more water than a cup. Get rid of the material that's displacing this water. I'm not saying it's totally going to fix it, but it will help. More importantly, that's what's supposed to have been done already.
8 minutes.
That's supposed to have been done already. Another thing, too, that brings to mind for me is the moment it starts raining, if we don't have dams at everybody's culvert, by way of a culvert that's 18 inches and 5/8 full, immediately, upon the time that rain starts making its way to the ditch, that water's getting out. Instead of it damming up, holding back, and can't go nowhere, and then now it's overflowing in the streets. These are just some simple thoughts. I would firmly suggest trying them out. Let's finish the last thing before we run off to something new. I respect all of you. Thank you for your time. All the members that have put in this all the work they've done. I want to thank all of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. We still have a few minutes. Any comments from the committee members?
I do.
Mr. Andrepont.
No, go ahead, y'all.
Mr. Andrepont.
You can go.
Mr.
Well,
Beam.
Thank you, Francis. Just because it's fresh, I do want to point out, it's very helpful having these detailed comments turned in. Obviously, we need to review those. Those are the latest. But just to hit on a few of what seems to be a theme with several of our speakers, I just want to comment. We agree a great deal. One of them, I think the comment was made, this is just one piece of the puzzle, but you need a plan. It absolutely is one piece of the puzzle. Very important one. But we do have a plan. And since November, I want to just say this because it is complex. We've been doing this a long time, but we have, throughout this multi-year process, have said all along, you got to do things with what we have in place that are problematic as best we can, and you got to prevent it from getting worse. Those are two different things. So the other thing I strongly agree with, I think Mr. Lewing said it, you could pass this tonight and tomorrow you're still going to have a drainage problem. He's absolutely right. We have to do that at the same time. It's very important, but that's, if you recall, and we continue to work on these at the same time, but you can't bring all that at once. They're both needed. So whether it's priorities of each drainage district, which we have, parishes and cities, which we have because we have been meeting with them multiple times. I want to bring a little comfort to everybody and the public that we are very active on that. You'll remember that Alan has said in previous meetings, our goal, and I think it was even brought up about the 3-year road program. Well, or we name all the roads. That is our goal. We want to have a drainage program that we have a 3-year plan that's revolving. It does not go away. So we're working on that. It won't happen overnight, but we want y'all to know that that's all to try to handle the problems we have today. But if you do that and do not do something that is going to add to the problems, you're wasting time. It is not one or the other, it is both. And all we're saying is we are working on a plan. We actually have made a lot of progress. But if only a plan is done and you don't prevent, every time concrete is added, you're adding to the drainage problem. And it's a prevention and treatment. It's really pretty simple. So I just think we need to clear that up. They're very good points, but we are doing both. We're not absent that. So I do feel like those are very good comments, and we certainly need to look at more detail, but I just don't want that to go misunderstood that we are not working on any kind of capital plan or how do we fix. We are. That's a whole separate issue. But we are definitely working on that as well. We don't think that should slow down the other part. Y'all choose, obviously, how long that is, don't get me wrong, but you have to do both. And let me add one last one, too, because I know it's lost in the shuffle. We're also going to be looking at the maintenance. Go back to what you passed in late 2015. Every drainage district and how they do business, how we're structured, we need to look at that. But this was a first priority. So it's more of a recap, and Francis, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take your time, but while it was fresh, I just wanted to throw that out.
Thank you, Mr. Beam. Mr. Angelpont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me preface by thanking everybody who showed up here this afternoon. Speaking for myself, I think there was more input this afternoon in this 1 hour and whatever minutes we met. Give us some guidance, some benchmarks to shoot from. I don't know how you feel about it, but to me, 80% of this is common sense and practicality. And you take the intelligence that you people brought here this afternoon and you incorporate that with the common sense, and I think we will eventually reach a goal that everybody will be proud of. And our goal is to solve the drainage problem. How long that's going to take, we have no clue. But it's people like you who take the time to come here and share your views, those of you who have on-hands experience, and those of you who work from behind the desk and know we have people out there doing the legwork and shared those thoughts with us this afternoon, and I want to thank you for that, because I'm going to tell you, I learned more today from you than I have in all these meetings that we've been sitting down, and I'm not putting anybody down. I'm just telling you that you enlightened me today in the direction that we need to go, and I thank you for that, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. White.
And I echo what Mr. Francis says. Thanks for all the speakers that did come up here tonight. This is why we had this meeting, is to get public comment, and I do appreciate each and every one of you that spoke tonight and give me some extra thought in my head as well. Thank you. I yield back.
I'd like to say one last word.
Yes, Mr. Flavin. You'd have to come to the microphone in 30 seconds, please.
Had a question for Mr. Beam. When we say we are working on the plan.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Comments have to be directed to the
chair.
committee,
Oh.
not to any individual. If you have comments you can make to the committee, that would be great, in 30
Great.
seconds.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm not privy to all these rules, but
Me neither.
I was
just
wondering if you
trying
could
to
ask,
forget.
if you could ask Mr. Beam, when he says we are working on the plan, who is we?
I would answer it on behalf of the committee and the jury. This police jury represents this parish, and we are working on a plan with the citizens. And so what we're doing here today is working on that plan. And so, of course, it's still incomplete, or maybe not to the level we need it, but that's why we're still discussing it. So that would be my answer for, unless Mr. Beam would like to.
No, I think you answered it well, but it's a good question, and Alan needs to fill in what I miss. The we is, as Mr. Scott said, the police jury, the 6 cities of Calcasieu Parish, and the 7 drainage districts of Calcasieu Parish, who all are responsible in some way, shape, or form for parts of that system. recognizing if we don't all get together and coordinate what their needs are and prioritize, you're right, Tim, we don't have a good plan, but that's exactly why we formed that group. And that's several entities, and again, Alan has to give the details, but they've actually already got a list of potential projects and rated them. And I think, matter of fact, the item the police jury passed, I think at your last meeting, the idea is to go out and we've got to get good companies who do this for a living to say, we need help when somebody says a project is good if we do this. Well, we need somebody to determine if that's feasible, meaning economic, because Mr. Flavin rightly brought up, we don't want to waste taxpayer money on a detention pond that won't help. So I'll shut up because I don't know the level of detail beyond, but that, to try to answer his question, it's
My only point was, and I wanted to clarify it because in my comments, when I said a plan, I wasn't referring to a plan of the parish, municipalities, and whatever. When I go to court, I'm going to take Mr. Emmett Soul with me, who is the expert. When I say plan, meaning to get engineering groups to come in here and say, let's look at your problem, let's come up with a solution to bring to you to say, hey, can we live with this or not? And that was my only point. I wanted to identify who is,
Okay.
we are working on a plan.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Can you keep 5 seconds? That's pretty quick. Name and address.
Well, thank you, Mr. Beam, that you had that question about the comments that were submitted. I wanted to clarify, because when someone has a question, I want to make sure that you know the answer. They were submitted. If you look at them, the print is a little bit different. We have italicized print on your report. The comments were submitted to Mr. Alan Wainwright on May 31st. That was your deadline. April 24th was the stakeholder meeting.
Correct.
Those comments were, we went to the deadline, the 31st. Within a few hours, the next day, the italicized comments were added on June 1st. And that's when the email was sent out to Mr. Wainwright. So therefore, to your question, to your answer, June 1st was, and they're complete.
All right, thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Any other discussion from the committee?
So moved to adjourn.
Well, I will add that we are not taking any action tonight, so we're not going to be taking any official action. Nothing's going to be passed tonight. We're going to take all this into consideration as we have throughout this process. If we need to have another drainage committee meeting, or if we go straight to planning and zoning, that's yet to be determined. But I would ask for one thing, Mr. Beam, if you could set up a meeting between some of our drainage committee and the drainage committee at the city of Lake Charles. I mean, if we at least reached out to them and let's see how we're talking and maybe what they're thinking. Sure. I know it's tough for them to maybe make a meeting, but see if that's something we could put together. I'd appreciate that.
We will.
All right, with that, I'll motion to adjourn.
Move. Second.
We're adjourned.